I landed at 4:58 p.m. on a cold Tuesday. 30 hours of layovers, delays, and crying babies behind me. I hadn't slept in 2 days. My throat was dry, and my back ached from hauling Michelle's ashes in a black carry-on that hadn't left my side since Manila. At baggage claim, I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and texted the family group chat. Landing at 5. Can anyone pick me up? Angie, my younger sister, replied right away. We're slammed. Just grab an Uber. A second later, my mom chimed in. Next time, plan better. It's rush hour. I stared at the screen, read those 2 texts 3 times, then typed, no problem. And that was it. No, how are you? No, sorry again about Michelle. Just me, sitting on a plastic bench next to the baggage carousel, waiting on 2 beat-up suitcases packed with clothes my wife would never wear again. The carousel screeched to life. I stood, shoved my phone in my hoodie pocket, and wiped my eyes. Not because I was breaking down, just dry air and jet lag, I told myself. I hauled off the first suitcase, the zipper barely holding. The second one was heavier. I dragged them both out toward the Uber zone. Quick note, before we go any further, share which city or country you're watching from. The airport buzzed with people hugging, kids screaming, suitcases rolling. Everyone had someone waiting. I scanned the crowd one last time, just in case. But no one was looking for me. Outside, it was gray and drizzling. I ordered a car. 7-minute wait. I leaned against a metal pole and tried to breathe, but the air felt tight. The cold went straight through my hoodie. When the driver pulled up, I didn't say a word. Just shoved the suitcases into the trunk, climbed into the back, and stared out the window as we pulled away from SeaTac. I should have known better. I mean, they hadn't exactly shown up while I was gone either. Angie sent one care package, socks and some protein bars. Mom sent a link to an article about grief. Still, after 30 hours and a funeral overseas, I thought maybe someone would show. I leaned my head against the window, watched the rain streak sideways, and said nothing the whole way home. The house was dark when I got home. I left the suitcases by the door and flipped on the hallway light. It flickered, then steadied. The dogs didn't come running because they weren't there. I'd boarded them before flying out, and the silence without them hit harder than I expected. I dropped my bag on the couch, sat down, and stared at the dent in the coffee table Michelle made when she dropped her laptop 2 years ago. That's how we met, actually. Dents. Kroger parking lot in Auburn, mid-January. She tapped the back of my truck trying to pull into a space. I got out expecting some teenager on their phone, but it was her, Michelle. Mid-30s, hair in a messy bun, blazer and sneakers. She rolled down the window and said, I'll pay for the dent, but you should really get a better bumper. I laughed, told her that bumper had survived 3 winters and 1 divorce. She raised an eyebrow. Then it's due for a better chapter. That smart mouth turned into lunch across the street. Then dinner 2 nights later. Then 8 years of marriage that never felt like work. She managed a dentist office in Kent. I did HVAC installs and maintenance across Pierce and King counties. We didn't have kids, but we had Rocky and Duke, our 2 German shepherds, and we were good. We had this little 1-story place in Puyallup with a giant maple tree out front. Every fall, Michelle would rake the leaves into piles and then jump in them like a kid. Said it helped her feel like time was still moving slow. God, she was loud. That kind of person who talked to strangers in line, sent thank you cards to cashiers, left long voicemails just to say, thinking of you. Her energy could fill a room and wear me out at the same time, but I loved it. She filled in the spaces I didn't even know were empty. When her company asked her to lead a 6-month expansion project in Manila, she lit up like they'd handed her the moon. This is the shot, she said. Real leadership experience, international ops on my resume. You good if I go? Of course I was good. We'd done distance when I took jobs in Spokane. We planned daily video calls, Sunday night movie dates online, and I'd fly out in December. She left in July. The plan was simple. I kept things running at home, paid the mortgage, walked the dogs, fixed the busted fence we'd been ignoring for years. Every morning, I made coffee for one. Every night, I listened to her talk about adjusting to time zones and bossing around dentists who refused to go digital. She sounded tired but proud. I counted down the days to December. Then, mid-November, I missed a call from her office manager. When I called back, the guy's voice cracked. Said Michelle had collapsed at her desk. Aneurysm. Rushed to the ER. I was on the next flight. She never woke up. By the time I landed, she was gone, just like that. No goodbye, no warning. One minute she was talking about a Christmas market she wanted to visit, and the next, her voice was gone from my phone, from this house, from everything. And now, all I had left were 2 suitcases full of her clothes and this dented coffee table. I couldn't even look at the coffee table anymore. So I grabbed my passport, maxed out my last credit card, and flew straight to Manila on zero sleep and pure panic. I landed in the middle of the night, poured into some beat-up taxi that smelled like cigarettes and diesel, and headed straight for the hospital. Michelle had already been gone for 2 days. They handed me her things in a plastic bag: phone, wallet, some makeup, a hotel key card. No one met me at the door. No one said sorry. Just a clipboard and a bunch of fast Tagalog I couldn't follow. I kept saying her name, and they kept nodding. Eventually, I found someone. Dr. Reyes, I think, who slowed down enough to explain. There was nothing we could do. It was fast. She didn't suffer. Didn't matter. She was still gone. I called home from the hospital lobby. "Did you buy trip insurance?" Mom asked. "No," I said, gripping the payphone like it was holding me up. I didn't think I'd need to. "Well, this is why you always prepare for the worst." That was her version of comfort. Angie's advice? "Maybe you can hire someone local to, wrap things up. A fixer or something." A fixer? She wasn't a problem to solve. "Geez, I'm just trying to help." "You're being touchy." I hung up. For the next 10 days, I lived out of a hotel near the embassy and walked everywhere because I couldn't figure out the currency fast enough for cabs. The hospital gave me a list of requirements: death certificate copies, notarized forms, embassy approvals, cremation consents. Everything needed a stamp. Everything cost money. I called the consulate, emailed HR at Michelle's company, begged anyone who would talk to me. Every step took 5 people in 2 days. And every night, I sat on a borrowed hotel bed, staring at her urn, trying not to scream. I texted the group chat updates. "They need a signed embassy release." I got her ashes this morning. Burial is set for Thursday. All I got back were thumbs up emojis. Once, Mom replied, "Sounds like you're handling it well." Yeah, handling it. Alone. In a city where I didn't speak the language and couldn't even read the road signs. Michelle's coworkers tried. One woman named Teresa brought me coffee every morning and helped me find a chapel for the funeral. She said Michelle used to share photos of our dogs during lunch. Said she talked about coming home and planting that garden we always said we'd start. At the service, there were maybe 10 people, most of them staff from the dental clinic, a few locals who'd worked in the office. Nobody knew her like I did. Nobody cried. I stood up to say something, but nothing came out. I just stared at the urn. My legs shook. My hands stayed clenched so tight, I left fingernail marks in my palms. Afterward, Teresa hugged me. "She loved you. She said she couldn't wait to see you again." I nodded, but I couldn't answer. My throat had shut down. I paid cash for the cremation. Had to use Michelle's last paycheck and our entire emergency fund to cover it all. I kept her ashes in my carry-on because I didn't trust the airline not to lose her. Every time I got stopped at security, they'd pull it out, ask questions, make me open it. I stopped explaining. Just let them search. By the time I boarded the plane home, I had a few pesos left in my pocket and a chest full of grief that felt like it had nowhere to go. No one met me at the gate. No one called to check in. Just those same cold little texts blinking on my lock screen. Customs waved me through like I didn't exist. I walked straight into baggage claim with dead legs and eyes so dry they burned. The carousel creaked and spun, and I waited alone. When the first bag dropped, I hauled it off, then the second. The third, her carry-on, came last. I stood over it for a second before grabbing the handle. Like maybe not touching it would mean none of this was real. I pulled out my phone, sent one last text to the group chat. "Just landed. Anyone able to swing by?" A minute passed. Then 2. Then Angie. "Still slammed. Try Uber, bro." Another 10 seconds. Then Mom. "We RSVP'd to the Morgan's dinner weeks ago. You'll be fine." That's what she said. "You'll be fine." I shoved the phone back in my pocket and stacked the bags onto one of those metal carts. My arms shook trying to balance them, but I managed to get moving. I was halfway to the doors when the smallest wheel snagged on the floor joint. The whole cart lurched. Michelle's bag slipped off the top, hit the tile hard, and burst open. Her clothes spilled everywhere. Folded sweaters, her old Seahawks hoodie, that pink scarf she wore every fall, bras, underwear, right there on the airport floor under a giant "Welcome to Seattle" sign. People walked around me, stared, but nobody helped. Until this janitor, probably late 50s, salt and pepper mustache, mariner's hat, walked over pushing a mop bucket. He didn't say a word at first, just knelt down and started folding clothes. After a few seconds, he looked up. "You okay, man?" I opened my mouth to answer. Nothing came out. He nodded like he got it. "Bad day." I nodded back. Together, we packed our things back into the busted bag. He zipped it shut and tightened the strap. "Name's Earl," he said, standing up with a grunt. "Come on, I'll walk you out." He grabbed one side of the cart and helped steer it toward the exit. We didn't talk. I didn't need him to. When we hit the curb, he stopped and patted my shoulder once. "Take care of yourself, all right?" He turned and walked back inside without waiting for anything else. I stood there until the Uber arrived, threw the bags in the trunk, climbed into the back seat, and gave the driver my address. He asked, "You visiting or coming home?" I said, "Neither." The ride was quiet after that. Rain hit the windshield, and the city looked gray and washed out, like the whole place was waiting for something that wasn't going to come. When we pulled up to the house, it looked smaller than I remembered. I paid the driver, hauled the suitcases to the porch, and stood there for a minute staring at the door. Everything felt off, like the house knew I wasn't coming back with her, like it was already colder inside. I unlocked the door, shoved it open, and stepped in with all 3 bags trailing behind me. The lights were off. The heater hadn't kicked in. The dogs were still at the kennel. I dropped the bags in the hallway and just stood there in the dark, listening to the silence press in around me. I took 2 steps inside and felt it right away. The air bit through my jacket. No heat. The thermostat screen was blank. I flicked on the kitchen light. Nothing. Dead. Michelle had warned me to winterize before leaving. I told her Angie promised to swing by, said Mom would make sure the thermostat stayed running. I walked deeper in, breath showing in the air like smoke. My fingers were stiff. I opened the fridge just out of habit. Empty. Not even a bottle of water. I checked the cabinets. 1 stale granola bar. I hadn't eaten since the airport ramen in Manila. Mail was piled up by the front door. Dozens of envelopes, most unopened. Some from the city, others from the power company. I kicked through them and saw one marked "Final Notice." Then I heard it. A steady hiss, low but unmistakable, like air escaping a tire. I followed the sound into the hallway, then looked up. A brown stain had spread across the ceiling, right above the kitchen. Shit. I ran upstairs. The carpet was squishy under my boots. The guest room floor was flooded, soaked through from one corner. I stepped closer and saw the pipe in the wall, cracked wide open. Water sprayed sideways and dripped fast, running along the trim, pooling near the heater vent. I turned off the main valve in the laundry room, but damage was done. Back downstairs, I didn't make it 2 steps before the ceiling let go. A chunk of drywall crashed to the floor, followed by a waterfall of freezing water. It slammed down onto the kitchen table, the counters, the floor, soaking everything. I didn't even move, just stood there as the water hit my boots and spread across the tile. I pulled out my phone and started calling. First plumber, voicemail. Second, booked solid for 2 days. Third, didn't answer. I called Angie. She picked up finally. "Hey," I said, "pipe burst upstairs. The whole kitchen's flooding. I need a place to stay tonight." "Ugh, dude. The guest room's full of baby stuff, and Tim's parents are staying. Can't you just—" "Figure it out, yeah, I get it." Click, I called Mom. "Water damage," I said. "House is frozen. No heat, no food, and I haven't slept in 36 hours. Well, we RSVP'd to the Morgan's dinner. Maybe check into a hotel? I just paid for an international funeral. My bank account's shot." Silence. "You'll get through it," she said, like I just told her I lost my keys. I hung up without saying goodbye, tried my brother-in-law, straight to voicemail. By the time I grabbed a bucket and started scooping water into the sink, I couldn't feel my fingers. My pants were soaked up to the knees. The smell of wet insulation hit me like mold and piss. I slipped once, caught myself on the counter. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. I looked around the kitchen, Michelle's recipe magnet still stuck to the fridge, now dripping wet. Her "life's too short for bad" coffee mug smashed on the tile. I wanted to scream, throw the bucket through the window, punch something, but I didn't have the energy. I hadn't eaten in over a day. I was standing in my own house like a stranger, water creeping up my socks, air so cold my breath fogged the windows, and no one, not one person in my family, offered to show up. The water kept rising. I grabbed every towel in the house and tossed them on the floor, but it didn't matter. The leak had already moved down through the vents. I opened the basement door and saw the first step submerged. I needed to shut off the power before the whole place shorted out. I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a flashlight, and made my way down. My boots sloshed. The smell hit me first. Wet wood, mildew, something burnt. The air was heavy, too heavy. The panel was on the far wall, half submerged. I moved fast, slipped on the second to last step, and went down hard. My ribs smacked the railing, but I didn't stop. I waded through knee-deep water, reached for the breaker, and flipped the main switch. That's when it happened. My fingers caught a live edge. Just a split-second jolt, but it knocked me back like a truck. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground, basement floor, face down in icy water. Couldn't move my left arm, couldn't lift my head. Dark. So dark I wasn't sure my eyes were open. There was a warm trickle running down my cheek. Blood. I could taste it in my mouth, coppery and sour. Somewhere upstairs, the carbon monoxide detector started shrieking. Beep! 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 Over and over, sharp, piercing. I tried to push myself up. My right arm gave out. My shoulder screamed. My legs were numb. I looked around for my phone, but it wasn't on me. It was upstairs, on the counter, still open to the family group chat. I tried to yell. Nothing came out. My chest felt like it was caving in. So I just laid there, water seeping into my clothes, my body shaking so hard my teeth clicked. And I thought, this is it. This is how I go out, alone, in my basement, after burying my wife and getting left in the cold by the same people who said they had my back. I don't know how long I was out. Hours, maybe. I faded in and out, lost track of time. At some point, I heard pounding. Hello? Voices, then a crash. My neighbor Kevin, God bless that man, had seen water pouring from under my front door while walking his dog. He kicked it in, followed the noise, and found me face down in freezing sludge. He called 911. Paramedics showed up in minutes. They wrapped me in blankets, pulled me up the stairs, and wheeled me into the back of the ambulance. Everything blurred. Sirens, lights. My vision blinked in and out like a busted street lamp. At the hospital, they said I had hypothermia, a concussion, mild carbon monoxide poisoning, and electrical burns on my left palm. My right shoulder was dislocated. My toes were frostbitten. My jaw was swollen. The nurse asked, "How long were you down there?" "No clue," I said. She held up my phone, sealed in a plastic bag. "This was still open. Group chat with your family?" I nodded. She looked down at the screen and flinched. "They saw your messages?" "Yeah." "And they said, try Uber?" "Yep." She didn't say anything else, just shook her head and walked off. Later that night, one of the EMTs came back in to check on me. Same guy who carried me upstairs. He leaned against the wall and said, "You're lucky your neighbor gave a damn." I didn't answer, because that was the truth. Kevin saved my life, not my family, not the people I spent years showing up for. Holidays, birthdays, busted water heaters. Every time they called, I showed. But when I needed someone, anyone, they left me to die in my own basement. I was still in the ER, hooked up to a heating blanket and an IV, when some guy in a fleece jacket stuck his head in the room and asked, "You mind if I ask what happened? I'm with Channel 4. The nurse didn't even look up. "You're not supposed to be back here." He muttered an apology and disappeared. But I guess that was enough. By 10 p.m., my name was all over the local news. Local man returns from wife's funeral, found nearly dead in flooded home. They ran photos from my social media. One of me and Michelle on our back porch. One of the house, front door busted in and lights flashing. They blurred out some of the family group chat screenshots, but kept the big ones visible. Try Uber. We RSVP'd to the Morgan's dinner weeks ago. People online lost their minds. By morning, the story hit national syndication. Hashtag Try Uber was trending. The internet didn't hold back. How do you abandon your own son like that? Hope the Morgan's pot roast was worth it. Blood isn't always family. I would have laughed if my ribs didn't hurt so damn bad. By noon, the hospital staff was treating me like I'd just walked off a battlefield. Someone from the front desk brought in a stack of cards and a prepaid phone. People were calling to donate, asking if I needed a place to stay. Then Kevin showed up again, holding a thermos and a brown paper bag. "Thought you might want something real to eat," he said, handing it over. Egg sandwich, hot coffee. I nearly cried. That same afternoon, a guy named Marcus from Evergreen Plumbing rolled up to the house after seeing the news. Said his crew would handle the repairs, no charge. Even brought new insulation and a water damage team. Later that night, a woman named Diane from a local grief group came to the hospital. "We can cover 2 weeks in a hotel," she said. "Also, therapy, if you're open to it." I didn't know what to say, just nodded. She didn't need more than that. Then, around 8 a.m. the next morning, the door creaked open and in walked my mother. Right behind her, Angie. Mom had her lips tight like she was walking into a courtroom. Angie looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Why didn't you say it was that bad?" Angie asked. "You never asked," I said. Mom crossed her arms. "This whole thing's been blown out of proportion." I looked her dead in the eye. "You mean the funeral I handled alone? Or nearly freezing to death in my basement?" "We didn't know," she said. "You didn't tell us. You didn't pick up." They stood there like they expected me to apologize. Like I was the one who embarrassed them. Neither one asked if I was okay. Not even once. Angie looked at the cards stacked on the table. "So, all these people just reached out?" "Yeah," I said. "Strangers did what family didn't." She opened her mouth, then shut it. No comeback for that. A nurse walked in behind them with my chart. "Visiting hours are ending." They took that as their cue, left without another word. When the door clicked shut, the silence felt good. Clean. Like air that hadn't been breathed by guilt. The next morning, the doctor came in with my discharge papers and a clipboard. He looked over the chart, then at me. "You can't go home alone right now. You've still got coordination issues and frostbite in your foot. Do you have someone to stay with?" Before I could answer, my mom, who had apparently arrived early and camped in the hallway, stepped into the room like she'd been summoned. "He'll stay with us." It was automatic, no eye contact, just a statement. Like I was another box on her to-do list. The nurse beside the doc looked at me instead, calm, firm, direct. "You don't have to. There are other options. Places we can set up through the grief outreach program, private hotel space, in-home care, support groups." I held her stare. My chest tightened, my jaw clenched. Then I said it. "I'd like to hear them." You could have heard a pin drop. My mom blinked. "What?" "I want to hear the other options." "You don't need to do all that," she said quickly, brushing her coat sleeve. "You'll be more comfortable at our place." "No, I won't," I said. Angie had slipped into the room behind her, coffee in hand. She frowned. "Come on, it's not like we didn't care." I laughed once, short and sharp. "When I needed a ride from the airport, you told me to Uber. When I texted from Manila, all I got were emojis. I buried my wife alone. Came home to a frozen house, a burst pipe, and nearly died in my basement. You were too busy with in-laws and dinner reservations." Angie opened her mouth, then shut it. Mom just stood stiff. "You're being dramatic," Mom said. "You didn't tell us things were that serious." "I shouldn't have to beg for help to bury my wife." "That's not fair," I cut her off. "No, what's not fair is me almost dying while you were eating roast beef with the Morgans." She shook her head. "You don't get it. We had our own stuff going on. Angie's been juggling the baby, Tim's parents, everything." I looked at both of them. "I'm not doing this anymore." "What does that mean?" Angie asked. "It means I'm done begging for scraps, done pretending like the bare minimum is love. I needed a family, and you both chose convenience." Mom's lips tightened again. "So you're just throwing us away?" "I'm drawing a line." The nurse cleared her throat. "We can have someone from the program meet you in 20 minutes. Hotel's prepaid. We can arrange transportation." I nodded. "That works." I signed the forms. They handed me a pamphlet. I didn't look at my mom or sister again. "You'll regret this," Mom muttered behind me. Maybe, maybe not. But as they left the room and the door clicked shut behind them, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Real, steady, quiet relief. Kevin texted 10 minutes later, asking if I needed anything. Diane from the grief group had dropped off fresh clothes and a toothbrush at the front desk. The world hadn't ended. I was still here, and from now on, it was going to be on my terms. 2 months later, I walked through the front door of my house and didn't flinch. The heat kicked on right away. Brand new furnace humming steady. Pipes replaced, insulation redone, ceilings patched. The kitchen still smelled like drywall dust, but it was clean. Mine again. New locks on every door. Kevin had helped me install them. He stopped by once a week now, sometimes just to sit on the porch with a beer and ask how things were really going. He never pushed, just listened. Diane kept showing up too, usually with some new casserole I didn't ask for. She didn't expect a big thank you, just handed it off and said, "Eat, don't argue." She was the one who nudged me into volunteering at the grief group. The first night I sat in that folding chair and told my story, I thought my voice would crack, but it didn't. I got through it, and by the end, 3 other people came up and said they felt the same. Alone, angry, forgotten. It didn't fix everything, but it helped. My family stayed quiet. Every couple weeks I'd get a bland check-in from Angie. "Hope you're doing better. Let us know if you need anything." Never once did the word sorry show up. Not in text, not in voicemail, not even implied. My mom sent me a link to an article about resilience. That was her way of pretending she'd done enough. I didn't respond. I'd set the boundary already. Clear, solid, non-negotiable. I wasn't open for half-hearted guilt trips or revisionist history. They didn't like it, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't chasing people who only showed up when it was convenient. Instead, I started building something Michelle would have been proud of. She used to talk about how hard it was for students to study abroad, how one emergency could ruin a whole trip. That stuck with me. So I called the tech school she went to in Spokane, talked to the alumni office, and started a scholarship fund. Small, nothing fancy, just enough to help students abroad with emergency expenses, passport issues, medical bills, family crises. I named it after her. No middle name, just the Michelle Fund. The first email I got was from a student in Peru whose luggage had been stolen. They used the grant to replace his passport, clothes, and laptop. He wrote me a thank you note, said the whole trip would have gone off the rails without it. Michelle would have loved that. I framed the email and hung it in the hallway next to one of her photos, the one where she's standing in front of that huge maple tree, arms wide, eyes closed, grinning like she owned the world. Some days, I still woke up expecting to hear her talking to the dogs or yelling at the coffee maker. But the silence didn't crush me anymore. It just meant the house was mine again. The life was mine again. And I wasn't waiting on anyone to tell me what that was worth. A year to the day after I brought her home, I stood at SeaTac again. Same terminal, same gate. But this time, it wasn't grief dragging behind me. It was a carry-on and a small bouquet of lilies. 12 hours later, I was back in Manila. I took a cab from the airport straight to the cemetery. The sky was overcast, heat thick in the air. I found her marker under a jacaranda tree, just like Teresa said it would be. I sat in the dirt, legs crossed, flowers in my lap. "Hey babe," I said, "I made it." I told her everything, about the house, about the scholarship, about how Kevin, Diane, and a janitor named Earl did more for me than my own family, how strangers fed me, fixed my home, and helped me stand up again. I kept thinking I needed my people, I said. Turns out I just needed the right people. I stayed there for over an hour, just talking. No tears this time, just words, real ones. When I got back to Seattle, something had shifted. The house didn't feel cold or empty. The silence that used to press down on my chest now felt calm, settled. I walked into the kitchen, dropped my keys, and saw the letter waiting by the coffee pot. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My dad's. It wasn't long, no apology, just a few sentences. He said he'd seen the news, that he wasn't proud of how things went, that if I was willing, he wanted to talk. Just me and him, no pressure. I sat with it for a day before writing back. Told him we'd do lunch, my terms, no guilt, no fake smiles. We met at a diner 2 towns over. He was already there when I walked in, looked older, smaller. We talked, not about everything, but enough. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't fake either. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.